the main thing we wanted to focus on was let's make this super, super simple so someone can get AI on their site in less than 5 minutes. That was the main target. And so we reached that target. So yeah, it's very simple. You just integrate it quickly.
Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Excellence Podcast. I have a unique show today. A brilliant young man working in the AI real estate space reached out to me about an amazing widget that all agents should be adding to their websites or landing pages. As our population is migrating from the Google search, many are using AI to conduct searches for them. We will learn how this search is different, and you need to get out ahead of your competition. Let's welcome the CEO and founder of DELI, Lyman Starmer, to the show. Welcome,
Tracy, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you reaching out to me because, we talked a little bit about what I'm working on as far as the show, but this is brilliant. And I'm actually surprised someone didn't come out with it sooner, but obviously the agents realize as they create this page and when they, that brief YouTube video, how to, this is cutting edge. Tell us how you got into this.
Yeah, so I started my first company, and then there's a translation period here. So I started my first company about 3 years ago called Pure Life, and it was a private social network for active adults. So anybody over 55 living in an active adult community. So we were talking about the villages before this. So we were directly working with them. And the whole idea was these active adults are using things like Facebook, Nextdoor, and all those companies are collecting that data. So essentially, you have the really nice physical infrastructure, so the shrubs, the pools, the activities, but the digital infrastructure was missing, essentially. So that was the idea of that. So we provided that. And so then you could have these residents.
Let me stop you there. Simplify the digital infrastructure. Explain that.
Yeah, so digital infrastructure, I'll use this as an example. So you've got Disney, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you been to Disney recently?
Well, actually, was at a Disneyland last month. Yeah, in California.
Okay, so usually they've got a band there, right? And I think it's called the Magic Band, and then they've got an app so they can basically track you around the entire park. You can put your credit card there. Yeah, that's an example of digital infrastructure. So it makes the physical infrastructure, so the rides, the process of waiting in line, it makes that easier for them to manage. So for example, if they have a new ride on the south end of the park and they need more people there, what they can do is use that Genie app or that Genie Plus app and say, hey, there's a discount on all the restaurants in the south end of the park. So then they can get people moving to the south end of the park. That's a really good example of that.
Okay.
So for places like the villages who pride themselves on being like a Disneyland for, this set group of people, they really had poor digital infrastructure. They weren't collecting any of the data. They didn't know what their residents liked, disliked, where they ate, all of those different things. So this platform was essentially there for these residents to create groups on, because there's over 3,000 different groups. Whatever you think of, it's there. And so this platform was created so residents could create groups, they could chat with each other, they could schedule meetups. So that was going really well. We got the adoption of the villages, and then we started having, portal companies like Realtor.com, Redfin, Zillow reach out to us interested in that data we were collecting. Because essentially where they were going with it was people want to know who they're about to live next to. They want to know what they're like. They want to know their preferences, things like that. And that data is hard to come by. And so we created and not to get too technical, we created an API, which is basically, just think of it as like a waiter for the internet. Let's say we'll use this as an example. Have you ever been searching on Google, like flights to Arizona, and the first thing you see are flights to Arizona in the Google tab? You don't have to go to another website. You've done that?
Yep.
That is considered an API. So that's taking all the information from another website and presenting it in front of you so you don't have to go to another website. So essentially what we created was an API to take our data, that resident data, so what they liked, disliked, their affinities, all those things, and then we gave that data to Realtor.com. So now if somebody was searching for homes in the villages on Realtor.com, there was a little, you could call it, interface on that listing that would say, hey, these residents like this, or your neighbors have a possibility of liking this. And so that then created an ecosystem of us collecting data and then people understanding where they were going to live, who they were going to talk to, things like that. That's essentially how
All
that
right, I
started.
know my listeners right now, they're probably spinning because obviously there's a lot of fair housing, I think is probably the large topic over this as far as a real
Yeah.
estate agent is concerned. But obviously a consumer can find out whatever they want and that's up to them to find this is out. When you saying you're
Yes.
finding, hey, who finding out information about our neighbors, you're not literally talking about like intricate information about your
No, no, no.
neighbor. You're talking about just
It's
basic.
anonymized. Correct. Yeah, it's not intricate, specific information, and specifically, there is a carve out when it comes to fair housing. There is a carve out for 55 plus. I think that happened about 10 years ago. You may know of that, but there is a specific carve out for active adult communities. But I'm just talking about information like, so let's say you're super into pickleball, right?
Right.
You could then understand that there is a pickleball club wherever you're going to move to. Essentially, that's the type of data that we were collecting.
Right. That's what I want to get. Make sure the listeners understand, or the popular restaurants that are there, that kind of thing, that they can find out.
Yeah, you got
Okay.
it. And so
Okay.
following that storyline, so you've got new build and then you've got those resale communities. So the new
Yeah.
build communities, the builder's still there. There's still an incentive to get people moving there. And so when you bring something like Pure Life, which was this platform we created, it incentivized people to move there because there was a whole digital infrastructure along with the physical infrastructure. That's how they were selling it. But then when you've got resale communities, then it's just kind of passed over to the HOA. They're just trying to cut costs, cut costs, cut
Yeah.
costs. And then when it comes to adopting a new technology, it's very, very hard to do that. So if you think about it, the ecosystem that we would have to create was we would have to sell into these new build and resell communities in order to get this data. And essentially, that was just a huge lift for people who weren't incentivized to do that. So what we changed to was just collecting data off of Google Places data. So how close people were to things. We were just
Mhm.
collecting data in that sense and then providing that to realtor.com, those sites and things like that. So we went from using the platform to not necessarily using the platform and just collecting data as a whole. And what we did was we created a widget called a Unify Score. And I know you said widget when introducing me.
Yep.
Just think of a widget as if you've ever been looking at a listing page, do you ever see the walk score? Have you ever seen the walk
I'm
score?
sure the agents know what you're talking about. I don't often look at those
Yeah,
pages,
yeah.
but
If you look on Zillow, they're full of them. It's like
mhm.
you've got walk score, you've got, it talks about the eco of the neighborhood. Those are widgets. So that's basically Zillow pays yearly to have the walk score on their site. And what the walk score does is just tell you, okay, this listing in Avondale has a 98% walkability score. So that means it's super easy to walk to the bars. You can walk to,
Okay.
the supermarket. That's a widget. So that's a
Right.
widget that just lives on a listing page. So what we did is we created a widget called the Unify Score that allowed somebody to go into a listing page and prioritize what their priorities were when it comes to living in the next house. So I prioritize living next to a hospital, or I really prioritize living next to playgrounds for my kids, whatever
Right.
that is.
Right.
You could prioritize that, and then you would get a score, and then all of the other properties you were looking for during that day would be based on that score. So you could then really understand, okay, this fits my priorities, this doesn't. So we're still following. There's still a line to where we get to DELI. So from that, we decided, and it was kind of just me sitting at a coffee shop one day with our CTO, our chief technical officer, who lives in Jacksonville.
Hmm.
I would always go to Southern Grounds and just think up things and brainstorm. And essentially, the whole idea was with ChatGPT, that at the time was huge. I think it came out maybe 2.5 years ago, but everybody was talking about it. And that was essentially that NLP, that natural language processing. You're being able to take what's inside your brain, exactly what you're thinking, and type that down. It was essentially magic. It was crazy.
Yeah.
It still is today if you use it, and some of the responses you get back, it's just incredible.
Yeah.
So the whole idea was, could we help agents who are always getting flooded information in from, hey, here are my preferences, I want to find this, I want this, and all these leads that are calling in, could we help those agents with the kind of think of a behind the curtains product that would make it seem like magic, where they could find somebody's perfect home in seconds rather than days or hours, or sitting there writing down all these preferences, looking through the MLS, all of
Right.
that. So that is when it kind of transitioned into DELI. So the whole idea so we started pitching this to agents around Jacksonville as well as Utah. We had some connections in Utah, Jacksonville, and they loved it. They were like, "Hey, this is great," but a lot of them were like, "If you could build something for the consumer," and when I use the word consumer, I'm attaching that to home buyers, right? So
Right.
people who are online looking for things. They were like, "If you could build this for the consumer, that would be amazing because people are going to my site, putting themselves in as a lead, and then sometimes I'm not responding to them, or maybe somebody's 6 months, they don't want to buy a home until 6 months, or all these different things about these. There's all these different criteria points about these leads. If you could build this for the consumer, that would be amazing because then they could just go to my site, utilize my site using natural language. And this is totally different than what Zillow offers, what all these other, brokerages offer. If you could do that, that would be great." So that was kind of the idea at first.
Where
And
did you, so, because a lot of times we go back in time, they would go on and there would be this list like how many bedrooms you want, how many bathrooms you want, and all this kind of thing versus the natural language. What can you say as far as the consumer being using the natural language versus using that more rigid approach?
yeah, so I call it a rigid approach. I call it an IDX feed. So an IDX feed is the feed that they're getting from the MLS, but I call it drop down search, which is basically all you do is minimum bedrooms, minimum bathrooms, then you do a little drop down and you're like maybe acreage, things like that. You
Right.
do not get all the qualities you want. So if you think about that, let's say every single brokerage down the block has that. Yes, the differences are a part of the, agents. How friendly are them? How trustworthy are these agents? So you've got those differences attached to the brokerage. But when it comes to the digital side of it, it's all the same. It's, hey, go to my website, search for a property. It's the same as the next door, but continue to do it. So the whole idea was you've got these people who want to know things like, hey, I want an expanded kitchen, or I really want there to be walk-in showers, and I don't necessarily want to call an agent yet because I'm not that ready. And in many cases, you've got to call an agent, and then that lead isn't really that powerful because that person really just wanted to know if it has a walk-in shower or if the yard was actually as big as it said it was, all those different things. So the whole
Because the
idea.
the the
Yeah, go ahead.
rigid one is not going to give that color commentary on a walk-in shower. It's just going to say you have a bathroom.
Correct. It's never going to say that.
Right. You actually have, and if the agent doesn't put it in the listing description, no one ever really knows until they actually go out there.
Yes. And in many cases, and I'll tell you how we figured this out, but in many cases, the agent will put something in the property remarks, but they'll leave it out in the fields. And so, for example, if you're showing somebody a home, 20% of those homes are probably non searchable because the agent didn't put it in the field. So you might be missing 20% of these pool homes. And yeah, you can see it in the pictures, but who looks at all of those pictures all at once? So you're just
Right.
relying on the data, even though that data in many cases is wrong.
Right.
Yeah. So what we had to do, and so I'll kind of explain the
Hmm.
how we had to do this was you've got 600 different MLSs across the United States. All of them are different. So all of them have different data rules. It's very, very messy. It's very fragmented. And if we think about it, so when I say data, I mean the listing data. So everything from the address to the price to how many bedrooms, bathroom, all that's very, very messy. But in addition to that, none of it can be read by AI. So what we had to do is sit there for about 4, 5, 6 months and take all that data and basically translate it to a way where AI could understand it. So we kind of had to put our human experience on it. So the perfect example is somebody going in there saying, hey, I'm interested in a 2 bedroom, 2 bath, but my parents are going to live with me and I really need a bedroom on the first floor. So AI is going to take that, and let's say your house has a basement. It's going to think the basement is the first floor. So you've got to teach it things where it's, yeah, the basement technically is the first floor. However, this person is talking about the ground floor because they don't necessarily want their parents to be
Yes.
walking upstairs, walking downstairs. So
Right.
that's a huge example of that. So what we had to do is we had to do that for everything, all the way up to I'm interested in living by the beach. Well, what does by the beach mean? Does by the beach mean the beach as your backyard? Does it mean 3 blocks away? You've got to teach it these things, and people don't
Right. Yeah.
necessarily understand how
Or at least,
difficult that is.
I mean, will it actually come back and actually ask for clarification? If someone
Correct.
says,
That's
if
what
I, because
we're
that, yeah,
so
what is by the beach? What by the beach to me is different than by the beach for you. Yeah.
Yes, but essentially it's got to understand why it's asking that question
Mm.
first. So you've got to even teach it, hey, you don't want to hard code it and say, hey, every time you hear by the beach, say this. You really want it to understand by the beach means, and then it'll ask a question of clarification. Or another example is, I would love to live near Publix. Well, near means different. It's a different thing to anybody. Near
Yeah.
could be 5 miles. Near could be a 2 mile walk.
Right.
So it's got to ask those things. So you can see how difficult that is to change that data into that. So
Hmm.
once we translated all that data, we created a platform such as DELI Sense. That's what we call it, DELI Sense, SENSE. So it's basically making sense of the data in an AI format. And just to pause there, a platform essentially, people think of platform and they just think of a product. What a platform is a place where you can build things off of. Have you heard of, do you have an iPhone?
Hmm.
Or
Yeah.
yeah, so an iPhone and an iPad, it's called the iOS. So that's the iOS system. So when somebody's building an app or when somebody's building something specifically for an iPhone or iPad, they use the iOS platform, because what Apple did is they build all this technology to where it's super easy to build something on the iOS, platform, which would then enable you to build apps for the iPhone and the iPad. So what we did is we built this DELI Sense platform, which standardizes all this data. So we're really the only the consuming party here, but essentially we could start selling this feed to where other products could come along and build innovative solutions on this, because we've already standardized this feed for AI readability essentially.
It's so interesting, yeah, the work you guys did behind the scenes, because it's not, teaching the AI. You had to teach it, and we could probably talk for hours, but let's bring it in
Yeah.
now and really start talking about the nuts and bolts of how and why, because I think that this is cutting edge. I'm actually surprised it's not out there, but it makes total sense to, again, as we these agents are extremely busy. They're hiring our assistants and so forth to have conversations, and they're spending time having conversations with their buyers and sellers, where these buyers and sellers can really be having these conversations at 10 o'clock at night when they're sitting there searching for these homes with
You got it.
Deli, and being that way. So I know we got some topics here. Let's go on there. You're marketing this right now, and you told me a little bit of that right now, to individual agents or brokerages, because I guess Jeff buy it for his brokerage or just him?
Yes, for his brokerage.
For his
Yeah.
so
So if you go
everyone
to
in his
Pursuit
brokerage
Realty,
has this on their landing pages there for your customers. What kind of feedback are you getting from them? I know you kind of mentioned it yesterday, but if on the podcast here, what kind of feedback are you getting from them? And I think you mentioned Navy to Navy Homes is using it as well here locally. What
mhm.
kind of feedback are they getting from their agents? And how maybe their consumers are using it or they're using it.
Yeah, so good question. So I'll use Navy to Navy as an example, then Pursuit. But like yesterday, for example, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and a lead came through, and it said, "Hey, Navy to Navy, a lead came through Delhi. Look at their conversation here." And so what the broker is able to do over at Navy Navy Mario, he's able to go in there and look at the conversation somebody had, the timestamp, how long
Uh-huh.
somebody was on there, if they're interested in an apartment for sale, price, large backyard, all of that. So then he can pick up the phone once they become a lead and say, "Hey, I know you're interested in a large backyard, but you're also interested in, you want the house to be brick." And so he's able to understand exactly where they're at in the buyer's process
Right.
to then better,
Go
sell that
deeper with
home.
some clarifying questions, right? Because they've already had,
Yes.
you're looking at this
Yes.
chat it just had, and you're able to now go in there, read that chat, and then ask deeper, clear, like, what does by the beach mean? Would be one of his questions, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And there's
Okay.
multiple. So, if you were to install the widget, there's multiple ways that somebody can become a lead. So the first way is, let's say you're chatting with Deli, and you ask it a question, and Deli responds. You look at a property, and let's say you're on there for about 3 minutes. There's a pop-up on there saying, "Hey, seems like you're really liking this. Would you like to become a lead for us to start sending you properties based on your search?" And so then we put that individual on a drip campaign, sending them properties based on that natural language search. That's the first
I
way.
did notice
The
that because
second way is when they're,
I went in and played with your demo that you had on. You have a demo on your site, and I went in and
yeah,
played with that. The one thing I went
yeah,
in and I asked it a very specific question. I live in St.
yeah. What
John's
was it?
Golf and Country Club, and I asked it, I want to live in St. John's Golf and Country Club. That was my statement, and I figured it would spit back.
Yeah.
Is it that fine tuned where I could ask, or how? maybe it's something you're developing, I don't know, that you can ask, say, I want to live, within a mile of Beachside High School, for example. Can you ask it things like that?
So what we're trying to do, and that goes into the process of teaching it what are these different landmarks. So what necessarily is the beachside high school? You've got to teach it these things, which we're constantly doing. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why your feedback, like what you just gave me, is great because then I can go in and because it's kind of like a toddler understanding its surroundings. So I
Right.
go in there and say, hey, analyze these schools because people are looking for this. So that's something we have to teach it, which we're constantly doing all the time. So that's perfect. But
Right.
for example, your Jack's Golf and Country Club, we've built it to where you can go in there and say Jack's CC, Golf CC. And then you can just type in this different type of vernacular or the slang that you would normally use,
Mm-hmm.
and it will understand those. So it's constantly learning to basically answer that question.
Are you guys like behind? I mean, because this stuff is so amazing.
Yeah,
Are you physically behind there, or is it teaching it itself? How do you? I know this is slightly off the
yeah.
tangent of the conversation a little bit, but I think anyone listening, like teaching it to understand what Jack's JAX GCC means. Like, or the fact that, hey, I want to live in St. John's Golf and Country Club, and it just immediately finds every home listed in that neighborhood. How are you teaching it?
We've got to go in there at first and just
Mm-hmm.
give it some human experience, just at first. And once you start doing that, and once it starts learning from the consumer behavior, that consumer behavior being all the questions it's being asked, then
Right.
it teaches itself. So we just have to go in there and input all the, like it takes a long time to basically, so Jacksonville, not everybody knows the surroundings or what's the barrier of Avondale or what's the barrier of Ortega, because sometimes they'll say Ortega is near NAS or something like that. And you'll
Mm-hmm.
see online, it'll say Ortega's in NAS, and then, okay, Ortega's near Avondale. So you've got to teach it these polygons and like, hey, this is Ortega, or this is NAS, or this is Avondale. So we've got to teach it that. And then soon, once it understands the barriers of locations, that's when we can start teaching it like you were asking. And then it'll start to pick up itself. Because again, it's like a machine. The more information it's given, so the more actual consumer behavior it's given, the more it understand what it needs to do to provide a successful experience.
So you don't necessarily, if I'm understanding you don't necessarily have to go in there and explain it to what are the addresses for every subdivision. And as soon as people are start asking about specific subdivisions, it's going out and starting to research about other, because it's now being asked direct questions about, I want to live in this
Yes.
subdivision. It starts to find out about all the other subdivisions because it's expecting questions like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You got it. Yeah.
That's
So it's crazy to me. I mean, I'm building it and I'm still kind of wow. So I can explain real quick too. So basically, what we wanted to do when it comes to integrating this on your site, we want it to be as simple as possible. Because in many cases, a realtor will spend a lot of time creating a WordPress site or a custom coded site. And when we were selling this beforehand, we would say, hey, it's just a widget. And then somebody would respond to us saying, I already spent time making my website. We were like, no, 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 no. This is not an additional website. This is something that sits on top of any website. And we wanted to make it extremely easy to where it took less than 5 minutes to integrate.
right.
So we did that, and I won't get into the details, but it's 3 lines of code, and you just place it right on your site. And as soon as you place it onto your site, it's already connected to real MLS, so the Jacksonville, NEFAR, Northeast Florida MLS. So
Mm-hmm.
we've already got all those data points, and let's say you're connected to Beaches MLS. We just plug that in on the background, and it's already trained again on that DELI Sense platform, so that it already understands AI with all of those locations and things like that. And so it's already ready to go. So you put that on your site, then consumers come to that site, they start communicating with it. And when we were building this earlier, this might fascinate you too. I'll get into this. But when we were building this earlier, we were showing properties, right? But
Mm-hmm.
without creating a separate landing page, you can't click on those properties. So what we had to do was create a landing page that was linked to those property, we'll call it property cards. Because if you're searching on DELI and you say, hey, I'm looking for a 2-bedroom home under 500,000, a property will pop up, right? Or like properties in the background will pop up. Those are property cards that just show a quick little image, a quick little description, and then you can click see details. Once you click the see details, it opens up to a white labeled landing page, which let's say your brokerage is Honeycomb Realty. It's going to have your logo there. It's going to say Honeycomb. It's going to have your colors there. The user is going to feel like they're still in the same experience. And from there, they can see all the details of the home. What we built out was, so you remember we were talking about the realtor remarks or the public remarks? What do you, I
Descriptions.
think we
Yeah.
would describe it as, yeah,
Yeah.
descriptions. It's like what you see on Zillow. That's all inputted when you input the listing on the MLS.
Right.
So we took that data and we also took the field data, so that what you put into the fields when you're listing a property, and we found the discrepancies that listing agents were leaving out. So what we were doing was analyzing the images. We were also analyzing the property remarks, and we were also analyzing the fields. And if somebody was leaving out that it had a pool in the fields, but it also had a pool in the pictures, or it had a pool in the property remarks, we would mix that and find that discrepancy. And then what we would do is we would generate the description on this landing page based on your original search on DELI. So every landing page is unique to your search, and it speaks directly to you. So if you were to go on there and you're saying, hey, my name's Tracy, I'm moving from Nashville to Jacksonville, I'm super interested in a house with a pool and a large backyard for my dogs to run around. Every home it suggests you is going, if you click on it, the whole home is going to speak to what you just asked. It's going to say, hey, Tracy, this is perfect for you. It's perfect for somebody moving from Nashville who wants a large backyard for their dog. And so all these listing pages, every listing page is not the same. It's all radically different based on your original search. So it speaks directly to you, essentially, is how we built that out. And so it's kind of its own ecosystem there after it's put on the site.
So you guys physically are going in and correcting these descriptions basically because it had a pool in the picture but didn't say pool in the description, for example.
Yeah, because that was the issue. That was the issue early on as we were going into things, and people were saying, "Well, you're showing me a property without a pool," and we were like, "But that's not our fault. That's the listing agent's fault. I mean, there's nothing we can do about that."
Right.
And so then we came up to the conclusion that yeah, there is something we can do about that, and that's basically melding these three things: images, realtor remarks, or property remarks, and fields, and then finding those discrepancies and then showing that. So that's what we decided to do in order to make our product a better product, essentially.
All right. So, as I mentioned in the intro, the movement from a Google search to now using these AI, obviously Chat GPT being the kind of the Coca-Cola right now. Everyone knows that one, right? There's other AI products out there.
Exactly.
And we discussed this, and this is something I think this is very important because I think more agents today are every training they go to, every conference they go to, AI is being brought up. It's a subject that is, along with video, obviously, they should be doing videos and using AI. If I was to pick top two or three
Hmm.
things that they're being told every day. So if they're using AI and they're properly going in and saying, "Hey AI, I've got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's got a large master bedroom. It's got a pool. It's got a walk-in bath. It's got boom, 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 boom," and it gives them all these data points and say, "Give me a professional description." However they might describe it, AI creates that.
Hmm.
When you go to search now through DELI and you're asking about it, it's looking for the same language that it might have used for that real estate agent in its search. It's finding its common
Yes.
language that it understands.
Yes, correct. So AI wants to listen to other AI. So, like for example, people who are working on their SEO to enhance their SEO, you want to start, and especially if you want to enhance your SEO on things like ChatGPT
Mhm.
or Perplexity, which is another search. You should definitely look into Perplexity. That's my favorite AI search. Wonderful. It's trying to replace Google, but the game of SEO has changed. It's no longer this keyword search. So if you want to start showing up first, you want to start populating your listing pages or your content with AI content, because essentially AI wants to see other AI. It understands, that it's written in AI. So you want to
Mhm.
front load all your content with, AI summaries, whatever it may be. You just want to do that. And that's just generative AI. That's basically going into Claude or going into ChatGPT, like you said, and
I'm
saying,
going.
hey,
All right. I'm
generate
going
a
off on a slight.
synopsis
I'm
and then
going off on
placing that synopsis.
just a quick question here when you we talk about it. So if I'm going in and I'm putting maybe my bio, whether it's on LinkedIn or on a website or talking about real estate excellence
Yeah.
podcasts and so forth, I really now with the search mechanisms want to use AI to actually write that because it'll more likely someone's looking, hey, I need a really good real estate podcast to learn about real estate agents and of course this is very detailed in Jacksonville, Florida. Because real
Yeah,
estate
that's
excellence
the
is
more
using
detailed, the
AI to
better.
write this stuff, it's going to pick that up.
Yeah. So a good example is, let's say you had a specific landing page for real estate excellence, just one landing page. You
Mhm.
would want to front load that landing page with AI content, but at the bottom, you would want to use words like summarize, key insights, or according to. Because if you search up on ChatGPT and you're like, hey, who are the best, realtors, blah, 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 it's going to use those words like in summary, according to, all those type of things. And so if you make its job easier, and if it doesn't have to do more processing, it can find the AI it's already going to create on your site. It's going
Mhm.
to use that in the summaries, and you'll be shocked. It's going to use it verbatim, almost maybe switching a couple of words, but it's going to use it verbatim.
All right, so we take this now to the agents who should be using AI to write their descriptions. They're putting it in there, and then AI is actually, creating it in a very fluent language. These phrases that you use in summary, according to, they should be using that in their descriptions, or how are they should they be
Well,
suggesting Chat GPT to write, or Perplexity to write those descriptions for them?
so the listings are in a weird place because again, it's got to go through the MLS. So they're basically writing those listings using AI, which is then filtered to the MLS. And then I don't know if you know how specifically it works, but you've got Zillow, Realtor. Let's just call those companies portals. So property portals. All those property portals where they're getting those properties are via an IDX feed. So that's what the feed is that the MLS is connecting all these listings to. It's an IDX feed that
Right.
we, as third party vendors, pay for. So once we get that feed, then we can, you know, populate all of our listing pages or all of our websites with those listings. So yes, even if the broker or the realtor were to change, in summary or use those AI specific words on their listing pages, if they want their listings to show up, first it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But let's say they on their site, let's say I've seen a realtor do this where they say, beautiful brick homes in Ponte Vedra or something like that.
Mhm.
If they start populating that with AI specific terms, then that would help with their SEO.
How can you find out these AI specific terms that obviously AI likes to use? As from what I'm understanding, they like to use this. We'll call it AI language, right? I guess.
You just speak to AI. Yeah, you find those language by talking to AI. It's like, hey,
Mhm.
what terms are the best? And again, it's like AI is always trying to summarize data. So if you use things like in summary, according to just those type of headers, it's going to know. It's going to crawl your page and say, oh, this is the summary because you just said in summary. It's very simple in that aspect. So it's going to start pulling data from where you're just telling it where to look,
Okay.
essentially, when it's crawling your page.
So what I'm leading to is now I connect this back to DELI. So whether the agent's looking for homes, because isn't it, I think it's, if I heard you correctly yesterday when we were talking about it, you originally started this for agents to help them with their search and searching for homes for particular
Yes.
buyers, and then the agent said, let's take it directly to the consumer, the buyer itself, to do their own search. So by working both sides of this and using the AI language and just simply having a conversation with AI, it's going to, a I think, this is where everyone's going. I mean, this is the Google.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Even though I still use Google, I mean, I use Google a lot. I'm trying to train myself to start having more conversations with AI. But there are people now that are walking around talking to Chat GPT through their phone on the voice thing. I mean, there are
Yes.
people actually
Yes.
doing that.
And what we're trying to do, so remember I told you what we had to do was we had to create this unified feed that basically took this fragmented MLS data and we created a platform, essentially
Hmm.
DELI Sense, and we made multiple products with that platform. What we're doing now, and I won't speak on a lot just because we're just starting this,
Yeah.
is we have a goal to be so legacy search, which is Zillow, Realtor, all those companies are competing for keywords. They're competing for keywords such like, let's say you say two bedroom, two bath in Tampa. Oh, well, two bedroom, two bath and Tampa are keywords that they're paying a lot for, that they're competing for. But search is not like that anymore on generative search, on AI, on Perplexity. Perplexity is trying to exactly match what you're searching for. So what we've been doing is what I told you before. Remember, I told you our listing pages. So let's
Hmm.
say it's 258 Riverside Ave or something like that. Those listing pages are curated based on your search on DELI. So now what we're doing is our goal is to become the number one search portal for these generative AI searches. And to do that, what we've done is we've taken, let's say 1285 Riverside, And we've created millions and sometimes billions of different versions of that page. Where, for example, if it says, if like you said, hey, my name's Tracy, I'm moving from Nashville to Jacksonville, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. And let's say that search leads you to this 1285 Riverside, that's going to be one version. And then you've got millions of other versions of that same listing page. Those are all ready for AI search. So now if somebody's on Perplexity, if somebody's on ChatGPT and they type in there, hey, my name's Tracy, I'm moving from Nashville to Jacksonville, I'm looking for 2 bedrooms, 2 baths with a large backyard. Our listings will pop up first because our search, the way we've created that summary, is an exact match to your search. And those AI searches want to show exact matches. So that's what we're doing now. And all of these legacy search platforms aren't prepared for that because all of their content is static. It's not moving, it's just the same. So that's kind of what we're building for now. And we're using that same technology to get there. So,
And then this is just an off the cuff question. I just,
yeah,
I
yeah.
know you have, and anyone listening, knows of Jeff and Mario here in town, Navy to Navy and Pursuit Realty. Some initial or any feedback that you've gotten from any of the agents that you're working with, because you mentioned you had some contacts in Utah. Just some
Mhm.
feedback that they've given, or even some recommendations that obviously you guys have taken in and maybe even already implemented, or maybe you're working on.
Yeah, so the best feedback we got. So we also have the Agent Assist product too, so people can sign up for that and just use it. It's kind of like a phone on their app where they can speak to it, and
Mhm.
again, it's for agents. So that's still out there, and we've gotten feedback for that. The best feedback we've gotten though is when you put a widget on your site, you want to be self-promoting. So you obviously want to promote the Pursuit brand, you want to promote the Navy to Navy brand,
Mhm.
Nancy Bass brand. So in order to do that, if somebody's looking up 2 bedroom, 2 bath in Jacksonville, you want your properties to show up first in that search. Well, we weren't thinking that, and so we had a lot of them say, "Hey, specifically if it's tenant placement, if they were property management, which we also do rentals too, they were doing their landlords a disservice if they allowed people to search all of them and didn't even present their properties first." And so we built in a system to where if you were searching on DELI for a 2 bedroom, 2 bath with a large backyard, and their properties, so they're being the customer's properties, the client's properties fit the criteria, that would be like the first six that would show up. The first 10 would show up, and it would say, this is a Pursuit listing, this is a Navy to Navy listing. So that was something that we as a technical team didn't necessarily understand. But when the realtor, sat there and explained to us that, these landlords are choosing them to promote their property, it was doing them a disservice. So that was great. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't understand that. So that was one example. Or other examples were just like, hey, when these leads are coming in, can you make sure they put their phone number in too? So we had to make those lead capture funnels to collect their phone number because that was super important. And email, yes, is important, but a phone number we started to understand was very, very important, and understanding who that individual was, they could just call them up, things like that. So that's two really good examples right there.
Well,
So.
it's kind of like we talked about, and I mention this all the time. It's the sales talking to the tech team. This is what we need on the road, and the tech team doesn't think like that, but they can make it happen if you tell them what you want and what you need.
Yeah, you just
And
have to
yeah.
say what you want or what you need. Or another quick example was a lot of people want to ask qualifying questions. So before they even become a lead, you want to know if they're pre-approved. You want to know if how long they've been searching for a home. So if a brokerage or a client were to come to us, because right now if you use Deli, it randomizes the first question it asks. It says, "Hey, what's the price range you're looking for? How many square feet you're looking for?"
Mhm.
We can add, "Hey, are you pre-approved? How long have you been searching for a house?" Add those things in there, and so when they become a lead, you can automatically see, okay, this person is a true lead. They're looking to buy in the next 1 month, those type of things. That's advice we got.
That's a couple things I wrote down here. You mentioned the word promoting, and I think agents who are listening here right now, you're going out. They're doing a lot of listing presentations. Are
Mhm.
agents tell me all the time going on to display. So you're not. Some agents are not. You're not getting every listing, or maybe you're not getting any listings right now. But here's an opportunity, I think, to set yourself apart a little bit. Just and not every seller is going to totally understand this, but I think, Lyman, you might be able to create a gumpified version of how to sell deli.
Mhm.
Is that they're promoting their home. Your home is coming up first. It's like if they're searching through Navy to Navy site, Navy to Navy's listings are going to come up first, right? The same way
Yeah.
you're when they're going out on that listing presentation, that people have to understand, hey, the world is changing a little bit. Not everyone's Googling. So Zillow isn't necessarily always the best thing. Some people they're migrating over to Perplexity, ChatGPT, and these other AI searches. I'm using DELI in that area, in the AI area. So your home is going to pop up first when someone's searching for that on the chat on the AI world. Did I get it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great way to describe it. We describe it that way too. So whenever somebody's like, hey, should I list my home with you? They can use that as a promotional
Yeah.
aspect of the conversation because again, in many cases when I sit down at night and I read all the different, what people are saying, communicating with Delhi. And a lot of cases someone will just go in there and say for rent or for sale. And of course, if somebody says for rent or for sale, your properties will show up first and they're clicking through the listings, all of that. So, yes, to answer your question, that is a really good promotional point, especially if you're a small brokerage starting out and you're trying to recruit people. It's always a good idea to say, hey, we've got this, technical aspect. So,
Well,
to our brokerage.
the other thing, I mean, you mentioned NEFAR, Northeast Florida Association of
Mhm.
Realtors, but are you literally connected in with through the agent to the MLS, or you're actually how is the connection? And obviously, because here in Northeast Florida, you've got St. Augustine's got their own board. You kind of want to include Flagler. Nassau County's got their own board in MLS. So now they're migrating and they're kind of, I think they actually, St. Augustine and NEFAR are actually joined together now. So you can actually search across
Mhm.
both of them there. But tell us how that connection is, or is there any restriction there?
Yeah, so let's say Nifar is already connected, but I'll just kind of describe a new market. So let's say we had somebody on the Emerald Coast super interested in using Delhi. So we would ask them, hey, what's your MLS or what are the multiple MLSs you use? They give us real quick. This is if we don't have any customers in this market. So,
Right.
for example, someone in the Emerald Coast ask, hey, we want to use Delhi. We ask them who their MLS is. We go to their MLS, pick up the phone. So this part's kind of manual. Sometimes we don't have to pick up the phone, but we say, hey, we're a new vendor. We're working with this brokerage. Can we get an IDX feed? It's just as fast because the MLSs are sometimes slow. So
Mm-hmm.
then they send us over a document. We sign that document. It's just a data agreement, just a few
What
stipulations, and then
everybody
we
is
get
here for.
their data.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get their data and we start training on that. And then within 2, 3 days, it's on the market. And so now, if somebody's interested in saying, or somebody's interested in the Emerald Coast and we've already connected to their MLS, each new member takes about 5 members to, sorry, it takes about 5 minutes to integrate. So as soon as we're connected with that MLS, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. But if we have an initial customer who's interested in a new market that we're not connected to, it takes about 2 days. But again, that's just because we have to sign the document. They have to send it back. It's just stipulated on how long that MLS takes. But again,
Mhm.
we're just signing a data agreement with NIFAR. I actually became an affiliate, and I know there's an open house next week, but I won't be there. But I like to be closer with the community, especially with like a real MLS or NIFAR. But yeah, to answer your question, it's pretty simple.
Okay, because I mean, anyone could be listening to this, and I definitely want to get this out to. I have a private Facebook page which I'll invite you to. That basically been everyone who's been a guest on the show is in, and
Yeah.
obviously if we can feed them some information, and then obviously everyone that comes and sit with. So how we talk about this widget, most all agents are from the standpoint have some sort of landing page. Sometimes it's attached right to their brokerage, or they got their own website that they've created and so forth. What's the process? And I would suggest everyone go on. Is that YouTube video on your website? I know you sent it to me in the email.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah. There's a
demo,
video on there. You can
and
click
it's
and you
just
can see it. Yeah.
and the widget shows up down the bottom, just like anyway. Hey, you want to look at homes? You click on it, and it comes up like if you're doing an internal chat, right? And you start talking to
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Exactly. So basically, the way to sign up is right now you just go to our contact page. The pricing page is always is changing, but again, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's basically $45 a month. Somebody's interested in it, boom, $45 a month to use generative AI, which is very, I say it's a pretty good steal just to have on your site. It's a whole search. And a lot of sites, we've talked to some brokerages, like a small to medium brokerage. They're like, hey, I'm spending the next 2 weeks integrating my IDX, which is those drop down searches that we were talking about. So that in itself takes quite a bit of time. So for something that takes less than 5 minutes to integrate on your site. You've got a whole new search experience. That's pretty crazy. So that's the main thing we wanted to focus on was let's make this super, super simple so someone can get AI on their site in less than 5 minutes. That was the main target. And so we reached that target. So yeah, it's very simple. You just integrate it
I
quickly.
think a lot of times we assume we know a certain language. You deliberately use generative AI.
Mhm.
What does that mean?
So, all right. So you've got these things called off the shelf LLMs. So an off the shelf LLM is a ChatGPT,
Hmm.
a Claude, if you've ever heard of those type of, and an LLM is a large language model. So
Okay.
basically what it does is sucks in a bunch of language, so words from the internet, and it takes in those words and it makes sense of those words. And so that's why, I mean, so for example, if you're asking ChatGPT what's 2 plus 2, it's not actually doing the math. It's just taking 2 plus 2 equations that it's seen on the internet and knows it's four because it's seeing, hey, four is showing up a lot. So inherently, these LLMs aren't really good at math. They're just doing math based on the words that they're collecting. So that is generative AI in the most simple form. And then what it is taking that language, so data points, right? So for example, the
Real estate
listing bedrooms equals
language.
two,
Is that what it's a
all of it,
large language model be like the real estate industry and the jargon we use and putting it
all of it. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. It's putting it into one model, and that model, so our model is just training itself every single day. Let's say we dump in new vernacular about real estate, or a new neighborhood opens up in Jacksonville. We
Hmm.
have to put that in, and it's just training itself on that constantly. And it's also training itself on the consumer behavior. So, like for example, remember I told you the near question. If you were like, I want to live near the beach, which we're consistently working on, but let's say within the next year, it's got thousands of these people saying, I want to live near. And if it follows up saying what is near, and those thousands of people, let's say 80% of them are saying near means 2 miles or near means 1 mile, then it will start to understand, okay, when somebody says near, they're most likely meaning 1 mile because 80% of our constituents are saying that. So that's AI, just that's kind of an example of
Teaching
generative
itself.
AI.
A couple of the
Yep.
other things when I was going on there and searching, and I didn't spend too much time on there, but I was just thinking that because you guys are constantly teaching it, obviously here in Northeast Florida, HOAs and CDDs. Well, there's a lot of HOAs, so you can't really. Everyone has an H. No, I wouldn't say everyone has a. There's a lot of communities that obviously have at least an HOA. Community development
Yeah.
districts (CDDs) are another thing, and I know there's people who, well, typically someone has any opinion on a CDD, community development district, they don't want one, right? So I was just thinking that would
Yeah.
be a search thing, and I didn't spend enough time on it to see if, hey, give me communities in St. Johns County that don't have CDDs. So I don't know if it's gotten there, but I can see that being like a common question.
That's a perfect,
Yeah.
again, this is like something you're telling me that I would go back to the tech team and say,
Hmm.
guys, I mean, I knew CDDs working with the villages, but what was more prominent was HOAs, people not wanting to live in an HOA, or people
Yeah.
wanting to live in an HOA was the more prominent thing, or
Well,
gated community, kind of in the same family.
right. Exactly. Well, if it has a CDD, it has an HOA. So if someone doesn't want to live in an HOA,
Yeah.
it would eliminate the CDDs. But the CDD being the next level up, of course, in my experience, most people they don't want to live in the CDD, but then they end up moving into one because of the amenities anyway. So it's just what they want the splash
And
pad
the
and everything.
CD,
You're gonna live in a CDD, bro. you know. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, no, 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 that they have the same thing in the villages. So that's, or they, yeah, yeah. I know sometimes they, like let's say you were moving into a house in the villages or something like that, you had to pay the HOA fee, and then the builder also took it was like a $20,000 fee on top of that. I forgot what fee that was,
They
but some
call it
people were
the
trying to.
capital. It's not capital improvements. I just dealt
Is
with
that the
one.
money they spent on making is that the money they spent
That
on making that community and they pass it off to the buyer?
Yeah, basically, I mean, the developers going in and they're taking a bond. The CDD is basically a bond they're taking out to build those amenities that only belong to that community. So it's like a county within the county. Where I grew up, I always tell
Mm,
people because I've taught on this and was on my board at a CDD for 11 years. Up north, everything was, the county had the county ball fields, all this kind of stuff that was all, county parks. Well, here in Florida, you could choose to be in a CDD or not in a CDD. We do still have county parks, but the the Nocatees and so forth with the splash pads, They are basically the developer building those things. Well, how do they pay for them? They took out a bond, and every homeowner's paying
Mm,
every month to pay back that bond with interest on there, and they can
wow.
borrow again on it and so forth. But yeah, everyone's chipping in from that
But you're
standpoint.
saying in order to have that splash pad, that's like a necessary evil.
Yeah, unless you live in I mean, if you got just a small HOA, sometimes the HOA can raise the money to do that. They're just charging them on a monthly basis. But yeah, when you start talking about, especially around anyone that's got, numerous tennis courts, anything large splash pad. What's the big thing? The crazy thing is people don't understand is the lazy rivers, like in Shearwater, for example. Or I think Mantee's got it.
Yeah.
They can't even go in the lazy river unless the lifeguards are on duty, right? So it's a glorified, it's better than an HOA. People don't understand it because the lawyers are involved and it's under the sunshine laws of Florida, and which makes
Hmm.
it very strict. HOAs, unfortunately, they're trying to rein in because there's so much scrupulous stuff going on because they don't have an attorney sitting there at their meeting telling them what they can and cannot
Yeah,
do to protect themselves.
exactly.
Yeah, that type of thing. But off on another subject. But that would be definitely something
Oh,
I
I
would
didn't know
go
that.
put in
Yeah.
the model is CDD communities, community development districts. I think a lot of them put in they just put CDD in the descriptions. So that would definitely be something to teach
Yeah.
which communities are CDDs and not there.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's
Um,
perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
so if anyone's listening right now, obviously they can go on to your usedeli.com,
Yeah.
right? Mm,
UseDeli.com.
if they want to actually, or do you actually, so when an agent signs up and wants to do you actually call them and have a conversation with them, or you let the
Right
website
now, I
take
speak
it
with
over? Can
them.
they talk to you?
I I like speaking with them just because I like to be very close to the customer, understand who they are, understand their problems. That's just me as an individual and as the
Yeah.
company we want to do and build. But again, I would just go through the contact us form, or I can give my email, whatever it may be. I just like to kind of reach out as a human, and then it goes that way. But the more we grow, it'll start going through the pricing page and things like that. But we're always messing with that pricing page, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just how our startup's going. We're always testing things out. But
Right.
yeah, you just speak to me, really. It's very
Yeah,
simple.
because I think that's brilliant, especially getting started, because you want to hear these little things. As you get big enough, it's gonna start teaching itself. But you're growing that way. But the more conversations you have, you can start inputting this information at a higher rate. So it's getting better and better. That's the end
Exactly.
vision, right? Yeah, faster
Yeah. And then
as you
if
grow.
if you have questions for any, even current customers, we've had at Honeycomb, they actually did tenant placement through our product. So people were interested in the property and they actually placed a tenant. They actually are in the midst of selling out or finding somebody a home to buy that came through Delhi. So these real leads are actually coming through and they're communicating with Delhi. So it's not just leads that you call and don't hear. They're really, because again, if somebody, you're catching that person at a very high moment of intent because they know what they want. They're going to put that information in there. And again, if then it goes on to the role of a realtor. If he's going to get up or she's going to get up and call, then that's their lead. So
Yeah.
again, we will produce the leads. It's just about getting there, calling them fast, seeing, hey, I know you're interested in this, this, this. So yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I'm gonna
very
have to have.
simple.
I mean, I had Cindy Browning with Roundtable Property Management on not last episode, the episode before, just a week ago, basically. And she's cutting edge. I think this might be something to have a conversation, at least educate her on, is something that maybe Roundtable Property Management would be interested in. Let alone their brokerage and
Yeah.
obviously their selling side. I went off on a because I had a question before that. I just wanted to make that statement there that you are doing that as well. All right, the question will come back to me. Upcoming developments for Delhi. You had that on the topics list. What do you got upcoming?
Yeah. So that essentially is we're always making the intent better. So we want to, at the end of the day, my vision of this is take New York, for example. I want it to be so detailed to where someone like me or a college student can go in there saying, hey, I've only got this budget. I've got a potential roommate. We want to spend X both, but he wants to spend a little bit more. So that means he needs a room that's larger. You see how like detailed that is? That's
Mm-hmm.
how we want it to be. And so you can really put your information in it. It'll find those homes. And the whole idea is if you're on a branded real estate website, so like let's say you're on a niche brokerage, I want to attribute that success I just had and that digital experience to the brokerage that this is on. And psychologically, if I attribute this success, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I had a lot of success on this brokerage. I'm going to go back to them. Or this brokerage wasn't calling me consistently to try to, sell me this home. I was able to go in there. really simple. I put my information in, I found a home I liked, I kind of sat on it for a little bit, and then I was like, hey, I found that same experience, I'm going to go back to them. So that's the whole idea we're thinking of on the widget side.
Mhm.
On the other side I was telling you about is we're really going to be working hard at, again, we know that search is changing, and we know people aren't saying Google it anymore, they're starting with generative search, and we're going to go really hard on being the number one listing that pops up when people are searching that way, and then essentially kind of become a lead gen aside. But those are the two things we're really focusing on. And then again, the more widgets that are on these sites, the more consumer behavior we're getting, and the more that model can get better and better and
Better
better.
and better.
So those are those kind of two upcoming things.
In your YouTube video, you use Jeff's website, the one you sent me. I don't know if you were just
Mhm.
sending that to me, or that's just one you've created to hand out to people. But anyway, so
That's his, yeah.
yeah, it's his landing page, and you can manually go up there, if I'm not mistaken, on his page and say, tell it, through the rigid way, the old way, the rigid way, or your widgets down there saying, hey, let's talk about a home, and click on it. Is that the way
Yeah.
you're seeing? Because I really see what you're doing, and I imagine there's going to be, people, competitors are going to start as AI grows. You obviously you're going to have some competitions and so forth. Maybe you get a big payout for you or something on this. But I see that old way going away
Yeah,
as this
correct.
system gets better to where it's really mastering, all those things like CDD, all the things we were just talking about, amongst the thousands of other things, because every place is so different, every community, every state, and that kind of thing. This is going to become the model. People are just going to send you to an AI and then to pick out the properties for you.
So I'll give you an example. Honeycomb Realty, right? They didn't have any IDX feed. So their whole thing was, we're going to have people who are interested in a home, or we're going to, give them a home. We're going to find them a home. They didn't have an IDX, so nothing was integrated. If you went to their house and you were interested in a home, you would just select, I'm interested, contact me. What they did was they fully integrated our widget. And so now they have an entire search experience with landing pages, lead forms, search, everything. Took less than 5 minutes. Whereas if they wanted to do other IDX, it would take about 2 weeks, because then they would have to get the paperwork signed. Everything would take a long, long time.
Right.
And so you've got brokerages like that are just starting up, who want to get out to the market quick. This is a very, very great idea. Let's get this on our site in 5 minutes. Let's do it. Then you've got, Pursuit Realty, or you've got Navy to Navy Homes, or Nancy Bass, where they've got that traditional search. Again, that transition, I believe, will come very quickly. It's
Yeah.
just now what we're able to see, okay, how many people are searching? Because for some of the sites, I was like, hey, let's keep your drop-down search there,
Mhm.
and let's really test how many people are searching each way. So are people using generative search more? Are
Interesting.
people using that more? And with
Yeah.
those stats, it's able to speak for itself. And
Mhm.
then that broker can go and say, is it really worth this having on my site? Do I want to go all in when it comes to having this generative search?
I don't think, I think we're within maybe months, maybe a year or two before, yeah, that old way, that's just going to be thrown away. People are just going to talk to it, say, hey, three
Exactly.
bedroom, two bath. That's what I'm looking for. Could be a 4 bedroom, we can use as an office, and that kind of, just having that conversation with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say is, I call that, and the technical term of that is one-click searching. So I don't know if you've used like Google, and if you say something like, "Hey, how do I drive a stick shift?" Right?
Hmm.
Instead of showing you 50 different websites with ads all on them, showing you how to drive a stick shift 60% down the page, you got to read through everything. You
Yeah.
get that AI summary that quickly tells you. So Google's been spending a lot of money on this Gemini AI summary, and it'll
Yeah.
quickly tell you, "Hey, this is how you do it. This is how you do it." So they're spending a lot of money on that. That's considered a one-click search. And the more consumers expect that, they're going to come up with everything in their mind and able to find a one-click search. And so the real estate industry is kind of lagging on that. And sometimes they lag on new developments, just because it's such a behemoth of an industry and there's
Yeah.
so much fragmented data. We want to be the first to the market when it comes to the one-click searching. So,
And my light's on a timer here.
oh,
Yes,
yeah.
that was my question. So, yeah, I think we're a year or two before that just totally takes over. All right. From your site, the cost is very inexpensive, but you guys are always tailoring that. I think it's still very inexpensive, and it literally just takes minutes for you guys to get this widget.
Minutes. Yeah.
Minutes to up.
All you would have to do is say, hey, we just say, who's your technical contact? In many cases, brokerages have somebody who built their website, somebody who knows how to do it. Sometimes the broker does. You
Mhm.
just connect us with them. on email, and I just send them 3 lines of code with your brokerage logo and the color you want us to use, and it's on your site as soon as that individual can put it on there. Super
Awesome.
simple.
Anything else I should have asked you? Did we not cover
No,
anything?
I think we talked a lot of stuff. I'm thinking, I'm sure you are.
I,
Like,
I
I
would.
think
When's the next time you're going to be in Jacksonville? You have any
I'm going to
plans
be, I believe, next week.
next week? How long are
Yeah,
you going to be? You going to be in town for a few days, or what's your
I think 10 days.
10 days? Okay, gives us a good window.
Yeah,
Send me the dates that you're going to be on. I would really like to put some of these agents and brokers, people that I've had on the show. So you got
yeah,
people who are producing and their sites mean something, and put a few people in the room for you, and because I think you're gonna get more
yeah,
discussion than what I've already discussed in here. And I do know in a couple months we're gonna have another large event down in St. Augustine, and yeah, I want to. We'll go offline. Call me when we'll cut this off and go offline. I got some other ideas I'd like to discuss offline with you, or
yeah.
thoughts that I think that we can work together on, because I think this is cutting edge. This is stuff. It's going to take over, so you might as well be the first person out on there with it, because the
You
new
won't see.
generation is getting into this generative AI, asking their questions.
Yeah, we are essentially we're the only product out there. So
Yeah.
there was a small company out of Auckland, New Zealand, that was just sold to Inside Real Estate, the CRM, but
Hmm.
they were just AI on the listing side. So they let you create a listing using AI. But that was the most similar thing, and that was
Hmm.
sold. So you won't see any other product out there specifically for residential brokerages doing
This
this.
this is
So
amazing stuff, Lyman. Congratulations to you, and
yeah,
being on the forefront of it, because like I said, it's the sales to the IT. There's such a disconnect, and you're making that connection, and it's going to make you a very wealthy man. I can guarantee that.
Well,
This.
thank you for doing this. Thank you for
Yeah.
doing this podcast because, I mean, just from a consumer of media by myself, just starting this company, it's very hard to find niche podcasts like this where I can go and listen to a potential customer, or I can just go listen to how they think. I
Hmm.
don't think there's many avenues. I don't think there's many avenues where I can do that at, or just anybody starting a brokerage. It's very hard to do that.
I want to connect you with Carrie Sauvé. She's actually lives just
Mhm.
on the other side of the northern border in Canada, but she's actually EXP's AI expert.
Oh,
She
really?
has her
Oh,
own podcast. If you go on LinkedIn and look up Carrie, Carrie, I think is how you spell her last name. But I had her on the podcast, I don't know, sometime last year. She is an AI expert, so she will actually totally like be into what you're talking about. And I think could
yeah.
open a huge door for you with the influence of just, being exposed to all these, EXP people and so
Yeah, I'm
forth.
just a hop, skip, and a jump to Canada too. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she is literally. She was going to have an event last year, but unfortunately had to cancel it in Niagara. So I don't think she's that far away from there. Yeah.
yeah, no, not at all, not at
She, I
all.
think she, I
So
think
that
she
would,
lives right there. Yeah. So let's put it, but let's end the show here. And if you can just give me 5 minutes, get my phone unhooked and everything, and call back. I want to talk about a couple things here if you've got a
yeah,
moment. All right. Appreciate you coming
sounds
on
good.
today.
Awesome.
Thank you, Lyman.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I'll call you about 5.
All right.
This may be it for today's episode of Real Estate Excellence, but we both know your pursuit of excellence doesn't stop here. To connect with the best of the best and really take your skills to the next level, join our community by visiting TracyHayesPodcast.com, where you'll meet more like-minded individuals looking to expand their inner circle and their personal experience. That's available at TracyHayesPodcast.com.